Hi, guys.
You gotta wave to him.
That's the perfect way. That's the wrong way.
Get over.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hyde Park Town Board meeting. It's Monday, July 17th, 6:30 p.m. Please join me while we pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So we're going to rearrange the agenda a little bit. We are going to move the executive session to after the acceptance of minutes, and then have the independent audit presentation will begin about 7 by the BONADIO group. So may I have a motion to accept the minutes of June 5th, June 13th,
Second?
and June 30th?
I make a motion.
And second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then may I have a motion to enter executive session to discuss a contract?
Make a motion.
And a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will be back shortly.
Oh, I did read that.
I didn't have nowhere to put my keys, so I put
Yeah.
one in my hat.
Oh, there you go.
Proud of my innovation. Okay. Alrighty, so may I have a motion to return from executive session?
Make a motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
And one final action is to remove Resolution 18 from the agenda because it was a little premature. And that was to utilize the services of a traffic engineers.
Okay.
And I just want to tweak the resolution to provide more information and it's not urgent. So can I have a motion to remove number 18 from the
Make a
agenda?
motion.
And
Second.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Great, okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. And I'm very pleased to see you all. And the BONADIO group is here to give us a presentation on the audit. So would you like to join us at the table here? And we also have the audit committee. So maybe you gentlemen and Joanne, you want to go here, Joanne, and the audit committee over here? And I'd just like to first start out with saying how appreciative I am of the audit committee and the really good work that they did. It was really a pleasure to work with you all, and I know the Comptroller was very impressed with how thoroughly you dug into the material. So maybe you'd just like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Charles Cullen. I'm Park President most of my life. And
Charles.
Yeah. Otherwise you get yelled at.
Do this.
switch it up. So my name is Charles Cullen. I've been a Hyde Park resident most of my life. Actually, for the last 18 years, and then I was also here as a child. CFO at Rondout Savings Bank, 150-year-old financial institution. We have a branch up the street, and graduate of SUNY New Paltz, so Dutchess Community College, very local.
Thank you. And
Good evening, Paul Cantor. A newbie compared to you, only about 13, 14 years in Hyde Park. Retired and decided to kick back and do a little bit for the community and see what I can do to help out, and I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
Brendan Lawler. I'm very new to Hyde Park by comparison to you guys. I've been here for 4 years. I'm a social studies teacher at Arlington High School. My wife and I were looking to buy a house, and we looked in a number of places, and we said that Hyde Park seems like the place we want to be. So we decided to move in, and we really enjoy it, and we're glad to be part of this community.
okay, well, thanks. I appreciate all your input and your involvement. So, and we have the BONADIO group. So, and Joanne Lown from representing our Comptroller's office. So, thank you for coming, and thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Tim Doyle from the BONADIO Group. I saw you had a number of resolutions over there, so I'm going to try and be conscious of your time. I did provide you all, just before you come out, with an executive summary of the audit results. And what I'd like to do is present at a very high level the results of the audit and some comments about your financial statements. And then certainly open it up to any questions that you may have if you'd like to dive in a little bit deeper. So on the executive summary, you'll notice the first items that it's a 2-page report. We note the deliverables that we provided to you. They include your town justice court of agreed upon procedures, the town's annual financial report for the audit report, and other internal control matters, which I'll describe a little bit more about that. And then finally, you have a required communication letters that's required under audit standards for all audits. And that just explains certain items that we're required to put in writing at the end of each audit. So on the summary of audit results, the first area that we're going to tackle is the Town Justice Court Agreed Upon Procedures Report. And that report looks a little different from what you received previously. Previously, you were getting an actual financial statement report. However, in our interactions with the court system, this is actually what they're looking for. And as it notes there, it comes from their Appendix 10 Annual Checklist for Review of Justice Court Records from the handbook. And I put a little link there if you wanted to see the handbook or follow up on any of it. But those specific procedures that are in that document come directly from their Appendix 10 for the annual procedures. And an agreed upon procedures report requires us to note the procedures and then note the outcome of the procedures. So you'll see there under notable findings, there were 3 areas where we performed a procedure that related to bail accounts that were not in compliance with what was required. And they stemmed around bail accounts were not regularly reconciled for both the justices, and also bail accounts did not agree to the current bail defendants report. So these things should be reconciled, and in working with your justices, what we found is there were several older items that may have been before they'd come on or early on that they were unsure as to how to reconcile them, what they were. So we certainly going forward can work with them on correcting that and how they would do that. But all of the other procedures that were required to be performed were performed without exception. So we just wanted to highlight those couple of findings.
And I believe that was something that was noted in prior audits as well, in terms of the balances that don't agree in their bail account. And I think that even predated the prior justices. It goes quite a long ways back. And I wondered, maybe we can just discuss that at a later time, in more greater detail, how we could resolve that and what actions the town board could take to facilitate that reconciliation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So that was the findings for the Justice Court. The next area is your town annual financial report, so that's the thicker report that you have. And there's a couple areas that we as auditors report upon. The first is we're required as part of our audit to note any internal controls that you have that are key to the financial statements. And note whether there are any material weaknesses or any significant deficiencies in those controls. So when we look at the controls, we're looking at internal controls that, if not operating properly or not in place at all, could result in a material financial statement error or fraud. So we look at those key controls, we gain an understanding of the controls, and then we test the controls. And a material weakness is a weakness whereby in the normal course of your activities, you would be unlikely to uncover a material error or fraud. We did not find any of those, so we noted no material weaknesses in those key controls. And then a significant deficiency is just below material weakness. However, it's worthy of noting to governance that this is somewhat of a significant deficiency. Again, no issues with any of the key controls in those areas as well. The independent auditor's report that we issued, so our audit is, the opinion is on your financial statements, which include both the actual statements as well as the supporting footnotes. And we issued a unmodified opinion also known as a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that an auditor can give you on your financial statements. And that's consistent with what you had in recent years that we look back at your financials.
That's very good, and thank you to our wonderful Comptroller's department. I'm sure TC was very pleased with that.
And so now on other discussion matters relative to the financial report, my first item was to thank management, similar to what you had just mentioned. Management and staff did a great job at being ready for the audit, allowed us to get in here in our first year and be able to get through the audit fairly efficiently. The first year is always the most time consuming as we get to know you and your procedures, but it went very well, so I did want to thank staff and management. The other thing, and I'll just note these highlights, but certainly if folks would like page numbers, I can reference the page numbers as well. But on the general fund highlights, we just wanted to note that relative to your budget versus actual, this current year you budgeted originally to use roughly $82,000 worth of fund balance in your original budget in general fund. You ultimately modified that budget to utilize $146,000 of fund balance, but your actual outcome at the end of the year was $474,000 to the plus. Now, there's a couple of significant factors that we thought we should point out to you as to why that happened. First of all is under your non-property taxes, which include your cable franchise fee as well as your sales tax. Your cable franchise fees were about $90,000 more than budgeted, and your sales tax were about $140,000 more than budgeted. Now, we looked at your past results to see how you've budgeted in the past, and it looks like you conservatively budget specifically for the sales tax. And that's not a bad model because you really have very little control over how much that's going to be. But this year, that was one of the reasons why those numbers changed, is you've got a lot more sales tax than you originally budgeted for. Secondly, and we've seen a lot of this year because I think in the last couple of years, housing has done very well, is your mortgage tax was also about $80,000 higher than budgeted. And again, you're going to budget conservatively for that each year because you can't be certain as to what the actual results will be. But between the two of those, that's roughly $300,000 of that swing that you had. And then lastly, under the general fund, under culture and rec, your budget versus actual was about $95,000 to the plus, and most of that was made up of a capital outlay for equipment that just wasn't purchased during the year. So that may be a timing issue where you're going to purchase that another time. So those are sort of the highlights for the general fund. Before I move on, any questions with regards to that?
No, it's good news though. We added, what was it, 425 or 485?
474.
474.
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. And it's good to know that our mortgage tax was a little higher, as well as the sales tax. And as you said, it's a little unpredictable, and so being conservative is much better than being overly optimistic.
You don't want to, you don't want to be the other way.
Yeah.
The other fund I just wanted to highlight, it's one of the more major funds, is your highway fund. And similarly, you had budgeted initially $32,000 of fund balance usage, changed that to about $22,000 in your final budget, and ultimately we're $289,000 to the plus in actual. Now, this one's a little simpler, and we've seen this a lot this year at all of our municipalities. A lot of it has to do with the weather. And in your highway fund, your sale of salt was $40,000, or part of that $40,000 budget positive variance was due to your sale of salt to both the school as well as the fire department. And then the other big item under the expenditures, your transportation costs were $258,000 to the plus over budget, or actually I should say under budget. And the bulk of that was $150,000 in salt expenditures, which again, we would totally expect based upon the weather and
Stockpile we had.
and that as well. So that was consistent with our expectations, but between those two, that pretty much makes up that full swing of the budget of what you expected versus what your actual numbers were. Which, if you look, the entire amount, the actual was 289, your budget adjusted was 22, so it's about $311,000 swing, and that's really those two items.
Great.
Lastly, on the financials, we just wanted to note that the town has completed the transfer of all assets and liabilities to the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater. That's in here as well. You'll see some items that we carved out as special items and footnoted them to explain them. But that's something that's different this year, or at least last year was partially different. This year is the continuance, and now that should be put to bed. So those are the highlights and the results of the annual financial report. Before I move on to the last two areas, any questions?
I don't have any. Does the board? No?
Okay.
Good.
All right, so on the next page, we talked about the other internal control matters letter that we issued to you. And the first thing we noted there is just what is another internal control matter letters. You used to have many years ago the management letter, which would be all of your internal control issues, big or little. A few years back, they changed it where they said those material weaknesses and significant deficiencies have to be part of your audit report if you have them, which you did not have those for the key controls. So this document has become a best practices document, things that are coming up that you should be aware of as other matters. And we did note a couple items here where we thought you could either use improvement in, or we just wanted to make you aware of. So the first item was long outstanding checks. We just noted in one of the accounts that there were some checks that were outstanding for a long period of time. Again, we'd be happy to work with you on those, but generally the process is that you first try to identify who they were to and try to resubmit them or find out why they haven't been cashed. If after you've tried to resubmit them or can't find them, then you would report them to the New York State Office of Comptroller unclaimed funds, and then they would keep them on record, and if that person looks or comes back for the money, you could point them to the direction of the Office of State Comptroller. So that was one item that we noted. And then we, in a separate document, and we tend to do this just so that it's not part of what we're presenting today, and you can work with your IT folks on it, but we noted several IT areas that could use some improvement. We talked a little about in the letter about the regular review of user rights, password parameters in terms of having strong passwords, firewall monitoring, just make sure that there is constant ongoing firewall monitoring, and then lastly mobile device security. And a lot of times we don't think about the things like phones and laptops, and so there were some specific comments in the letter about that of areas to improve. So those were the items that were under the other internal control matters.
Well, I think that was one of the great things about our audit committee. Their familiarity with the industry was very helpful in terms of, you both, I believe, reviewed our firewall and thought that there were adequate protections there. But also we met with PCA, and we are actually working on our passwords tomorrow. We're doing, following the direction that you provided on those. So that's good. Yeah, and the mobile device security, I think we were still pondering about that, how to execute that with PCA, but again, that we're taking those into, putting them into action, our recommendations.
And then the last item we just wanted to note, it's a couple years away, but we suggest you start talking to your actuaries about it. The GASB statement number 75, if you think of your other post-employment benefits, or GASB 45 now, you're required to record that very large liability on your books, not in the funds, but in your overall statements. And there's certain disclosures. Well, GASB 75 is changing the methodology that the actuaries can use. There's only one method that can be used now. The other big impact that will be in there is that in your statements, there's a required supplemental schedule that shows the full dollar amount of that actuarial amount. Your amount is about, I think, $12.8 million. You're allowed to amortize that over time to build it up, so you don't have to take that hit at once. Right now, you're at about $8 million on your statement of net position. So if you were to, with the new standard, you're going to have to put 100% on. So if you were to change today, your statement of net position would drop by about almost $4.5 million.
I think you might just need to clarify that with the board. It's really what we owe our employees
In the
in the future for their
recovery.
benefits. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
But it has to be part of our balance statement. Is that what you're
In your
referring to?
in your overall entity-wide statement, it does. It doesn't affect your funds or your budgets or
Right.
anything like that, but it does affect that overall first statement that you're looking at, which is your statement of net position and statement of activities. They're full accrual, so you show the full amount. You've not been required in the past to, you were able to amortize it up to, theoretically, after 30 years, it would be the full value, so you're not quite there yet. But with 2 years from now, when you implement GASB 75, you'll have to put the whole amount on there. So it will just be a very large amount. It's already large, it's gonna get larger. And so you wanna start letting your stakeholders know that, that we get this is not something that either has to be paid soon or can be paid soon, because the state in New York State does not allow you to fund it either, other than a pay-as-you-go. Some states do, and that's part of the reason for them changing this, is that the readers of the financial statements, mostly bond folks, need to look at that and be able to see apples to apples and say, all right, everybody's showing it at 100%. And there are certain states that can fund it, so they're going to have a better net position than other states that can't fund it. They want to be able to look at that consistently. So that was one of the reasons for the big change. But the thing I would suggest to you is, right now we're working with our school districts who have to implement it next year, which for them is right now, July 1st, they changed it to the next year, and our community colleges, and the actuaries are reaching out to them and saying, we think we need to do a full valuation under 45 in this last year for you, and then you're going to have to do a full valuation in 75, and full valuations cost much more. So what we've done, and done some research for our schools, and noted that as long as you're within a 24-month window of your actuarial valuation date, you don't have to have that extra roll forward. So I know in certain instances we've saved our clients some money where they've gone back to the actuary and said, you know what, I don't need that full valuation this year, but we will have it next year under 75.
And I think if I'm interpreting your statements correctly, it's really the effect of it is on your borrowing. Is that the biggest implication of these GASB changes? Is that it has an impact on your?
I don't think it will have an impact on, I mean, obviously I can't say for certain, but we've talked to the different bond companies to ask them about that, to say, hey, now that you're going to see this full value, you're aware that really nothing has changed, and they've said absolutely.
Okay.
So,
Oh, that's good.
we don't foresee a change there, but what we do, you're going to need to comply with the standards. So there's an accounting issue there, but also it's important for your stakeholders, the folks that, I know as exciting as I'd like to think accounting is, that everybody doesn't look at these statements, but you are apt to have taxpayers that will look at the statement and say, why did we go from 8 million to 12 million? So those are the kind of conversations you want to start having now, just so that they're aware that nothing really changed. It's an
Just that
accounting.
it's full reporting.
And when the statements do change, we'll put what's called an emphasis of matter paragraph in the auditor's report that will point them to a footnote that says, hey, here's why it changed. But you just should be aware of it. You're a couple years off, but you might want to start talking to your actuaries now and thinking about that.
Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question on, when you read financial statements, you see pension funds that are underfunded. Is that what you're talking about? It's underfunded?
No.
Not
no.
relative to this, but it's the same concept. This is not pensions, but these are other benefits, such as health insurance and
Post-employment.
the other post-employment
Okay.
benefits, correct? Other than pensions.
All right.
Yes, thanks.
Money's owed to future employees who retire or.
And it's an actuarial evaluation of what that may be as of now into the future, right? But you can't pay it.
So it looks like we're in a pretty good financial position.
Auditors can't say. I can't say what.
I can. I just did.
Well, I mean, I think it's really great that, our comptroller had informed us that we had really grown the fund balance last year, and it's nice to have that confirmation and to have you go through everything and confirm that all of our accounts are clean and done properly, that we have good controls in place. And I wanted to thank the audit committee. I know they went through some work to put out an RFP and get a new auditing firm in. And I think it's great to bring in a different firm from time to time so that we make sure we're getting a fresh perspective and that checking all the boxes. And I'm wondering if the audit committee has any observations or questions that you wanted to ask.
Well, just on that last one, you mentioned, that they'll have a net. They will have a negative net position after
Correct.
that adjustment. How long can that stay negative, really, before you get scrutiny maybe from the state or something like that?
So the question is there a time frame or concern where you've had that negative amount out there, whether it be the negative amount from the actual liability or the negative amount that results in your net position or your equity? And we've had that discussion with the bonding agents as well. In New York State, you have no ability whatsoever to fund that. You can only pay as you go. So every municipality in New York State will always have, especially once everybody has to put the 100% amount on, there is no municipality in New York State that will not have a negative net position because it's such a large piece and you're not able to fund it. So the way you would get that number down is to pay more or hold money in trust in an asset to offset it. You're not able to do that in New York State. Now, there has been legislation that's been put forth in both the Senate in New York State to change that and to create a trust fund, but it has gone through either of the houses each year, usually passes one, isn't brought up on the other or doesn't pass on the other, so they have not created that third-party trust fund yet, but it's been talked about for over a decade now, but there's no way to fund it. And we sort of look at it also and say there's no way to fund it now. We know what the 2% tax cap has done to municipalities in New York State too. We're almost wondering if there would be a point where they allow you to fund it, and now no one has any fund balance to fund it. So I doubt that will change, and especially once you put the 100% amount on it, everybody will be negative. Yeah.
Right. Okay, does anyone have any further questions? And it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you. And it's a lot of detail. This is a complete picture of the town's financial position, and it's a lot to review. And thank you. I appreciate your good work.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Well, we'll be in touch, I'm sure, for following your audits. So, and I know that we'll be in touch too. So thank you so much for your work and
Thank
for
you.
coming
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night. then.
Good night.
Yep. So our comptroller had a accident, and so he's fine, but it was a brand new car, so he had some issues and was not able to stay late tonight, and so he's going to discuss the semi-annual budget report at a next meeting, but everyone has one in their packet, and it basically is just an update for the years thus far through the end of June on the revenue and expenditures, and we're in good shape there too. So with that, I would like to move on to the public comment on resolutions only. Do we have anyone who would like to comment? Okay, so then let's just go ahead and move on to the resolutions.
Resolution 717-1 of 2017, resolution recognizing and accepting the independent audit financial reports for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2016, and the independent audit report on communication of internal control matters identified in the audit.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-2 of 2017, resolution approving budget revisions to the town of Hyde Park for the period of June 2017, budget revision number 2017-06.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-3 of 2017, Resolution authorizing the town supervisor to execute a renewal for 2017 of the intermunicipal agreement with the Hyde Park Central School District to cooperatively fund a school resource officer program.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye. Resolution 717-4 of 2017, resolution authorizing the town supervisor to execute a renewal for 2017 of the intermunicipal agreement with the Hyde Park Central School District and the town of Hyde Park for the presence of police officers at the Hyde Park school events.
And a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-5 of 2017, resolution authorizing the town supervisor to execute the renewal of the Hyde Park Central School District lease agreement for 2017 for the Hyde Park Recreation Senior Center at Hyde Park Elementary School.
And second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
And just like to wish Diane Cullen a speedy recovery. She was not feeling that well, and I know that her seniors miss her, and she always does an outstanding job for the town, especially for our parades and events, and so wishing Diane a speedy recovery.
Resolution 717-6 of 2017, resolution establishing the 2017 Christmas Eve holiday for the CSEA Town Hall unit and non-union personnel.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-7 of 2017, resolution request for Greenway Trail designation of the Hyde Park Trail System by the town of Hyde Park.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-8 of 2017, resolution accepting a donation from the Hyde Park Rotary for Hyde Park Recreation 2017 Music in the Park.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-9 of 2017, resolution authorizing Assessor Kristen Cables to attend the Institute of Assessing Officers one-day seminar on reading deeds.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-10 of 2017, resolution authorizing John Schleppe as an alternative member of the Town of Hyde Park Zoning Board.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-11 of 2017, resolution authorizing the Hyde Park Zoning Board to release the balance of escrow from the Erosion Sediment Control Stormwater Management Project for HPHR LLC.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye. Resolution 717-12 of 2017, resolution accepting the bid of Amity Construction as the lowest responsible bidder for the repairs to the South Drive Bridge.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-13 of 2017, resolution accepting the bid of Calanian Industries for the 2017 highway blacktop work and authorizing the town supervisor to execute the blacktop contract for 2017.
Second?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-14 of 2017, resolution authorizing a highway superintendent to sell or otherwise dispose of highway vehicles.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-15 of 2017, resolution authorizing police officers Martin Monaco and Thomas Mirabella to attend the basic juvenile officers training.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye. Resolution 717-16 of 2017, resolution authorizing the town supervisor to sign an agreement non-protunct with Bright Days Day Camp for use of the Hackett Hill Pool.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 717-17 of 2017, resolution pursuant to Section 40-9 of the Town Code regarding unsafe building.
Second?
And maybe Warren, do you want to
Yeah.
just speak to this a bit?
Sure. We have a provision,
That's okay.
in our town code with regard to unsafe buildings, buildings which may become a danger to the general public, may be accessible and attractive to minors as an attractive nuisance, as well as to vagrants, trespassers, or a place of rodent infestation, or presents other dangers to the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the public, or is unfit for the purposes for which it may be lawfully used. And our town code provision mirrors the town code, the provision in the New York State town law, which vests municipalities towns with the authority to adopt this type of provision, which requires us to have our building inspector examine the property and report back to the board as to whether the property meets any of these categories, which would enable us to take action against the property. We have several options on how to proceed after that, and one of them would be for us to take action and actually tear down the building and tax the cost against the property itself. We have other ways of dealing with it, but the first step is to have the building inspector inspect the property and issue a report to the board, and then the board will then review that at a public session with the building inspector and make a decision as to where to go from there. So that's what this resolution provides.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Yes.
I'm
we've
excited about that.
had a lot
Yeah.
of complaints
Yeah.
about this particular property,
Absolutely.
and so it's good that we're moving ahead on that. Okay, so
And this is, do you want me to tell you? And the property is the,
6 East Market. The,
The car wash behind the old
Behind
Dodge
it.
dealership.
Right.
yeah, has become what they call an attractive nuisance.
Right.
So we need to have
Well,
that addressed.
exactly.
Good. Okay, so did I ask for a second on that as of yet? Second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Just wanted to give a quick update on our Sidewalks to the Future project that's going on Route 9 right now. We embarked on this back in 2014. It's really finally getting to the exciting part. Colarusso has been working for the last several weeks in preparing the shoulder for the installation of the new landscaped green space with new curbing, new drainage that will be bike friendly, because currently now the catch basins are below the surface of the road, and so it's very dangerous for bikes. So they're working on that, as well as they will be bringing in their subcontractor to do the sidewalks and the curbing next week. But the important thing to note is that there will be some lane closures beginning this week while they do that work. In terms of the catch basins in particular. So with that noted, I hope that residents will be very patient and careful, and if they can find alternate ways to get to their destinations. It's the project area is just a bit north of the drive-in, and it goes to the entrance, a little bit south to the entrance to Park Plaza. So, local residents will know that you can find alternate routes pretty easily by going on Garden Street, but we're not going to be directing people that way because we wouldn't want large trucks and that type of thing going that way. But, so it is going to be beautiful, and they're moving ahead very, very well, and they're excellent to work with, very impressed with them. And so that's the news.
Exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and then tomorrow I'm going to be participating in the countywide shared service meeting where the county executive is putting together a plan, an efficiency plan for the county that will then be submitted to the legislature and then eventually up to the governor. It's been quite a process, and appreciate the leadership at our county level on something like this. I know that we had a lot of people that came down from the Department of State, and they were very favorably impressed with how the organization that our county partners introduced to this project. So that's all the updates I have. Again, wishing Diane a speedy recovery, and thanks for a wonderful 4th of July parade. It was great, as usual. And so that's it for tonight, I hope. Anyone else?
I make a
have
motion to
anything?
close.
Okay.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you, Donna.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hasn't been a car wash for years.
No, don't forget.
Start taking action.
Yeah.